starting off the week by previewing a game. Are we going to get Victory Tuesday this week? We're going to tell you what needs to happen when Washington visits Philly to get that for everybody on the Locked On Commanders podcast.
Your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome in, Commanders fans, to the Locked On Commanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, free and available on all platforms, including YouTube and the WUSA 9 Plus app on your Roku or Amazon Fire Stick. And we thank you for making us your first listen or view of the day. I'm David Harrison. My co-host is Chris the Rooster Russell, both of us credentialed members of your media covering the Washington Commanders. Chris doing it for the Team 980, where you can find Heat and Pete Medhurst live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to noon Eastern, or you can find him anytime on the Odyssey app. And you can find me writing about your Commanders for Commander Country, a part of Sports Illustrated's FanNation.
Absolutely. And David, today's episode of Locked On Commanders presented by our friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick between 2 and 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive an instant, a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 by using the promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com and the promo code Locked On. All right, coming up, our biggest confidence and concern points for the Commanders as they head into this Week 10 matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles. They are coming up. But first, David, we need to dive into the most recent injury report. A little bit of a different schedule this week. Again, Thursday, Friday, Saturday for the main practices. I know you were at Command Central and taking it all in, and actually we'll start for change with some good news, and that is Jahan Dotson is expected to play for the Commanders. Now, of course, there's always a chance that there could be a setback somewhere along the way, but he made it through the practice week. The team has promoted it. The team has announced it. This seems very similar to how they handled Curtis Samuel week 4 last year against Atlanta, where they couldn't wait to get him back, and they announced it, and they were beaming, and they were looking for some reason to get the fan base all juiced up. But I got to be honest with you, I'm a little bit juiced up that Jahan Dotson's coming back. Before we get to the rest, your thoughts on JD returning for the first time in 5 games?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited about it too. And look, we were talking about it, there during the week. Like, this dude was on a tear, right? Like, I mean, he was a legitimate contender, I think, for Offensive Rookie of the Year before he got injured. And then now he's missed so many games that, I mean, he's almost going to have to play lights out every single week in order to do that. But remember, this is a guy that caught touchdowns in the first 3 of his 4 career NFL games. And, I think when you look at the initial way that the Commanders approached his injury, some rest and all that stuff, certainly, checked him out for the next week, but then try to work him back slowly for the week following. And then when he re-aggravated it, and then basically what we saw is just kind of like, you know what, you just need time. Let's just shut it down completely. We're not even going to look for a period of time. And we'll come back to this thing later. And ultimately, I think it's a smart thing to do because you would rather have him longer than get him for maybe 1 week with an aggravation than you lose him for another 3.
Yeah, I guess the one thing that you always wonder, right, is he made it through the practice week, which he wasn't able to do the last time that they brought him back. Yeah. If I remember correctly, he was able to make it through a Wednesday practice, then re-aggravated it on a Thursday. Yeah. So he was able to do more in terms of succession Thursday, Friday, Saturday of this week. So you feel good about that. But I mean, there's nothing to say. We know with soft tissue injuries that he doesn't go out and pop it on the first route or even in pregame warmups, quite honestly. I mean, knock on wood, hopefully that doesn't happen because, man, do they need him. More on that in just a little bit. And obviously the juice that he can provide. But David Cole Holcomb ruled out for a 3rd consecutive game. J.D. McKissick out for a 2nd straight game. David Mayo out for a 2nd straight game as well. Tyler Larson was limited on Saturday. He's questionable. Now, I think if memory serves me correct, either Scott Turner or Ron Rivera, I can't remember, said that Larson should be okay, right, but If he's not, Nick Martin is, of course, his replacement and could start. And then Andrew Norwell was added to the Saturday and final injury report as a DNP. He's now questionable for the game after not being listed at all on Thursday and Friday. So they've got more issues potentially on that interior of the offensive line.
Yeah, Andrew Norwell with a groin that popped up Saturday, and yeah, that's kind of the surprise of the weekend, and it's unfortunate because you never want to have rotating offensive linemen if you can help it, but you definitely don't want to lose one on the final day of preparation. Like that's definitely bad juju because whoever's going to replace him, has obviously not been preparing with the ones and doing all those things. And granted, there's been enough kind of turnover that everybody kind of has the same amount of experience with each other at this point in time, really. But still, you'd rather have, even for some of the deficiencies we've seen, you'd rather have Andrew Norwell in there compared to other guys. Tyler Larson, yeah, like you said, it was basically stated that, it sounded more like it was basically a rest day. Like he does have an affliction, but just kind of give him, a day to kind of relax a little bit. And I think that he will be playing. But yeah, the loss of not just Cole Holcomb, but then David Mayo, his backup. John Bostic, I think, did a pretty solid job against Minnesota, so he's going to have to do another one against Philadelphia. But I think Philadelphia brings a few more challenges, so we'll see if John can match up to the requirements.
Well, yeah, that RPO game that Philadelphia runs so well is going to be really, one of those like eye discipline, every kind of discipline that you can imagine. And in a lot of ways, Bostic's seen a lot of football,
right.
And he's widely considered a high IQ player, but it really puts you in a bind. And Philadelphia is so good at it. Holcomb missing a third straight game. I mean, look, that's a concern because that popped up seemingly out of nowhere after the Packer game, I think it was. The Packer game. And then all of a sudden now it's 3 straight games and he's a free agent to be, right? So you're not getting that full answer whether he can be the long-term Mike here. And then there's this, Chase Young.
Yeah.
I don't know, okay, but by the time people listen to this, we might have official clarity. So I'll leave it at that. But it didn't sound like he was going to be ready to go.
No, I mean, this is just either the ultimate smokescreen by Jack Del Rio and Ron Rivera, because typically Jack, and this, like when you ask him about player statuses, he's usually like, oh, that's Ron's lane. I'll let him talk about that. But he even talked about, Chase will get going as he gets more comfortable. And right now he's not, coming off 100%. So he's kind of diving into the fact that Chase Young doesn't seem fully game ready yet, which is, it's fine. In the grand scheme of things, that's why you get the 21-day window. But we know that everybody was basically waiting. It's like, okay, well, if it's not the first week, and then maybe the second week, and then so on and so forth. But yeah, from the comments that Ron made on Saturday, I'm not expecting him to play. Again, it's not official, but so it's either just a massive smokescreen so that Philadelphia maybe gets lulled into this belief that he's not going to play and maybe they don't prepare for him, or it's, it's what we think it is and he's not going to play. But I don't know. I would be very surprised if Coach Sirianni's staff is caught, sleeping at the wheel with Chase Young. I think, if number 99 is in that window, you prepare for him, whether or not the team is saying he's going to play or not.
Absolutely. And then we have Carson Wentz, who did throw a little bit on Saturday. Ron told you guys at the team facility, but throwing lightly. I mean, that sets the stage for kind of next week. I did an episode earlier this week, basically discussing the timeline and how complicated it is to get Carson Wentz, even if he's medically cleared, ready to go for next Sunday in Houston on a short week, so on and so forth. People miss that. Certainly go back and check that out. We will see if Carson Wentz does again get medical clearance. David and Avonte Maddox is really the only key injury. He has been ruled out for Philadelphia. That's really their only key loss. And that does factor into Jahan Dotson's return, which we'll discuss coming up later in this edition of the Locked On Commanders podcast.
But first, this episode brought to you by Total Wine and More. The holiday is coming, and you can find what you love at Total Wine and More to share with those around you that you love, or at least maybe like enough to share a beverage with. With so many great bottles to choose from, it's easy to find a new favorite single barrel bourbon, which I love some single barrel bourbons I will definitely be visiting, or the perfect gifts for everyone on your list with some help with a friendly guide from Total Wine and More. And all with the confidence of knowing you found something special for the lowest price. Find what you love what you find only at Total Wine and More. Curbside pickup and delivery available in most areas, which is obviously highly convenient. Visit TotalWine.com to learn more. Spirits not sold in Virginia because we have the VABC and we all understand and love the VABC, right? And also not available, spirits are not available in North Carolina, I'm assuming for the same reason. Drink responsibly. You must be 21 to participate.
All right, thanks again for making the Locked On Commanders podcast your first listen and view each and every day. For your second listen today and watch, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter to the most to the biggest stories in sports. Go beyond the scoreboard, beyond the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, it's available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. And go check out David's appearance there on the, I guess this would be the last edition of the
it was the Friday, yeah,
right after the district attorney, not the district attorney, the DC Attorney General Carl Racine made his announcement. David was a guest of Locked On Sports Today, so go check that out right now. We've got bold predictions coming up shortly, but first we're going to share what we're confident in and what we're concerned about. Pertaining to the Commanders and the Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly, baby. David, what are you most confident in when it comes to this Commanders team? And again, this Monday night's game on the road against the undefeated Eagles, who have, by the way, been resting around. They haven't played since a week ago last Thursday in Houston.
Yeah, and a lot of people look at that as an advantage. It actually might be a little bit of a disadvantage. That's a long time to go without playing football. But anyway, I'm confident in the fact that Antonio Gibson may not start the game, but he is going to be the primary back for the Washington Commanders on Monday night. And, for those who don't know, basically the first running back on the field is the starter, right? Brian Robinson could be the first back on the field for the first play, which is why I say I don't know who's going to start, but Antonio Gibbs could out-touch him by 5 or 6. You know what I mean? When I look at this matchup, and I know that Jordan Davis is missing from the middle of that defensive line, but they still have some very talented players there in the middle. And I do expect Washington to test that kind of soft middle, which is really the reason I say I don't know if Antonio Gibson will start, because I wouldn't be surprised to see like an up the middle run to start the game. Let's test it a little bit early. Let's see if we can get a 3-4 yard run at a B-Rob there to start the game and kind of put us in like 2nd and 7, 2nd and 6, something like that. But I think ultimately running side to side, especially again, you look at Taylor Heineke, we talked about his limitations down the field. If you can't work the field vertically, you need to work it horizontally. And honestly, if you can work it both ways, you want to do it anyway. So I think AG gives you the most left to right ability to attack the Eagles defense. And so I think Antonio Gibson getting the lion's share of the work of the running back group, especially with J.D. McKissick still out, is just the most logical sense in a game plan from a game plan perspective.
I agree with all that, but I was really disappointed by the lack of touches, the lack of targets for Antonio Gibson against the Minnesota
as a
Vikings.
receiver.
What was that?
Right. As a receiver, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think he only had 3 targets and maybe 2 catches, if memory serves me correct. And they strung out Brian Robinson on a couple of long, like flat screen type passes. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me when Antonio, and I know you're trying to preserve and protect him. I got it. I understand that. But you didn't have McKissick last week either. You don't have McKissick again this week. This seems to me like a perfect opportunity to get him 6, 7, 8, 9 targets in the short passing game.
Yep.
And you can use him out of the backfield, as we've discussed, out of the slot. You can spread him out wide. You can do all sorts of things. And that would help you in terms of setting up for third downs and on third down, because David, I'm most confident in Washington actually still struggling on third down against the Eagles pass rush. And then the noise from that fired up, liquored up crowd that is going to be at Lincoln Financial Field. The Commanders
makes me really happy. I'm going to be safe and tucked away in the press box. I'll tell you that much.
No doubt about it. The Commanders, once again, are back in one of these third down ruts. They're 5 of 22 combined in the last 2 games after coming out of it a little bit against the Green Bay Packers. They were 7 of 16 overall in that game. Now, they started 0 for 4 in that game, including the pick 6 to Devondre Campbell, right? Before that, and leading into that pick 6, they had a 3 for 26 stretch, again, that bled into the Packers win. So, I mean, when you combine all of these numbers, right, you say, they have like 12 third down conversions in their last, I think, 5 games or something like that. That's not good by any stretch. I mean, I don't expect them to be that bad, but for the love of humanity, can we convert a third down and stay on the field and not keep asking the defense to break out the pail and the shovel and to save our you-know-whats? I mean, please, can we do that?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And, and honestly, it kind of reminds me, Ron talked about on Saturday, that he felt Carson was really kind of getting a rhythm coming out of that Detroit game. And even though it was a loss, they had done some good things in the second half there, build on what they were able to do in Jacksonville. Obviously, Carson is still getting under the system and everything.
Right.
And then he felt Philly, that the 9 sacks against the Philadelphia Eagles really kind of shell shocked him. Mm-hmm. And then in Chicago, he said he thought he kind of started coming out of some of those problems and some of those hindrances from that game. And then you see him get the injured finger. And I think a lot of these third down struggles, you look at with Taylor Heineke, a lot of these drives, you're either not really facing third downs because you're just bang, 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 you're moving down the field, or you're in 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, 3rd and long. And I mean, the game-winning drive against the Indianapolis Colts, no third downs on that drive. You know what I mean? That's a prime example of that exact situation. So, it's going to be one of those things, but we always know third down is going to be a massive down. So what they come up against, 3rd and 5 or less is what you want at worst. Right. Anything longer than that, and you're in a bad situation. Speaking of being in a bad situation, the Commanders secondary was in a very bad situation against Philadelphia Eagles last time we saw them. And no William Jackson, obviously, because now he's in Pittsburgh being scratched for the back injury. Kendall Fuller is still going to be there. You got to think Jalen Hurts is going to try to get Devontae Smith against Kendall Fuller, see if they can go back to that well. But also, they're going to look to test Benjamin St-Juste. And look, Benjamin St-Juste has stood up to some challenges, but we've also seen him kind of falter, right? And the Minnesota Vikings were able to get some things on him. I think it's very clear. Ron thinks, I think, you think, Benjamin St-Juste thinks, Jack Del Rio thinks that pick 6 should have stood. And if it does, honestly, I think the Commanders beat the Vikings. So that's a pretty big penalty right there. But there's been some, Ben's still young, and there's been some look at Ben and how much he's grown moments. The Philadelphia Eagles are absolutely going to test him, and they're going to test him with A.J. Brown, and they're going to test him with DeVonta Smith, and basically whoever else they can get on him. So I'm not necessarily concerned about how they perform. I'm just concerned because I know that they're going to come out swinging at those guys, and if they can't, or if Philadelphia is successful early, it's just going to be an all-night thing.
Yeah, I'll add a couple of things. That was, I thought Benjamin St-Juste best game so far this year, and maybe in his career. Remember, he had like 4 third down pass breakups in that game, including 2 in the end zone. For me, the biggest concern point that I have is another terrible first half by the Commanders offense. We've talked about this, how in Heineke's first 2 starts, he was brutal in the first half, but at least he had a touchdown drive. Last week, he was brutal in the first half, and he didn't have a touchdown drive. Now, they did get a late first half field goal from Joey Sly, so I guess that was good, and that was a pretty decent drive. But there's no way you can beat the Philadelphia Eagles by showing up to Monday night's game dead on arrival. I mean, you just can't go 30 minutes and have barely a pulse, David, however it gets done. And obviously, I go back to the third down point that I tried to make earlier in this segment. I mean, you got to sustain some offense. Even if you don't score touchdowns, get field goals for the love of humanity. So that, again, that's my biggest concern. Coming up, our picks for a Monday night in South Philadelphia. But if you're looking for fun in a competitive fashion, look no more. This podcast is brought to you by our friends at PrizePicks and PrizePicks.com. What is PrizePicks? It's daily fantasy action where you can make entries on PrizePicks that allow you to challenge yourself, guys, on player projections generated by the PrizePicks.com staff. Here's what you do. You pick between 2 and 5 players. So say you like Jalen Hurts to go more or less than the passing yards and certainly rushing yards, and you combine that with Taylor Heineke or Antonio Gibson. All you have to do is, again, pick a minimum of 2, a maximum of 5 players in any game in any sport, but specifically the Monday Nighter, because that's what we're talking about. You can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. No competing against other people. It's just you versus the PrizePicks projection available. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. Safe and fast withdrawals available in over 30 states and in Canada. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks is going to give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100.
All right, guys, finish up this episode with our key players to this game. Washington Commanders going up against the Philadelphia Eagles, our bowl predictions. And of course, we will make our final score predictions as well. Chris still undefeated when he picks the Commanders to win. Didn't get 100 likes. We got like 70 likes of that last preview before the Vikings game. I guess not enough people confident enough to force you to change your pick. Hopefully we can get some better luck this time. But Chris, who is the key commander to Washington pulling out a victory this week?
Well, look, it may be too early for this because it's his first game back in over a month. Jahan Dotson hasn't been in the lineup since the week 4 loss at Dallas, where he scored a beautiful touchdown in the back corner of the end zone from Carson Wentz, and then promptly got injured and obviously, again, tried to come back after missing 2 games and then had to miss another 3. But here's why I think it's really important, and this is going to lead into the information you got from the guys at Locked On Eagles, is with no Avonte Maddox, one of their really good corners, and they have 3 for crying out loud between Bradbury and Darius Slay. No Avonte Maddox in the slot. That's generally where they use Jahan Dotson, especially in the red zone, especially in goal-to-goal situations. That's an area that you would think Jahan Dotson can eat and can, really help this offense. Again, is specifically in tight situations inside the 5, inside the red zone, inside the 10-yard line, goal-to-goal situations. So to me, I think getting him back is a mental boost of confidence, but also, let's be honest, it's talent and it's being able to maybe, if you can get the ball inside the goal-to-goal situation where you can punch it in instead of having to settle for 3.
Yeah, so Gino Camilleri and Louis DiBiase have Locked On Eagles telling me that Josiah Scott probably going to be the primary fill-in for Avonte Maddox if Josiah is healthy enough to go. And then CJ Garner-Johnson, they also expect him to get some slot reps there for the Philadelphia Eagles defense. And I can tell you right now, just from covering the Buccaneers and seeing CJ, GJ, whatever he calls himself with the Saints for a little while, he's no slouch in the slot. So this isn't a total decimation, but they do think that whoever plays in the slot is going to have a better game because of the loss of Avonte Maddox. They don't necessarily think it changes the outcome. But Chris, I'll tell you what, man. I mean, if Taylor Heineke and Jahan Dotson, I mean, this is not only Jahan's first game back, right? But Taylor, it's their first game in live action together. And really, this is their first week practicing together. He wasn't throwing. Taylor wasn't throwing to Jahan during training camp and the preseason and all that stuff. So we'll see how quickly their chemistry can get going. But if it can get going against a weakened slot because of what's going on there, I think that could be a significant shifting point in this game. So my key player of the game, I'm going to stick in the secondary, but I'm going to flip it. And I do think it's Benjamin St-Juste. I think, you know what? I would like to see Ben get that pick 6 back. There's a pick 6 that should be in his stat box that is not in his stat box. I would like to see him get that back. That's going to bleed into another prediction I have moving forward. But I think that if he can come through, look, Kendall Fuller, he's a veteran. We've talked about this. He wasn't out of position. He didn't get completely burned by Devontae Smith on a lot of those plays. There were some moments, sure, but especially on like kind of the worst plays. It's not like he was just totally left, eating dust from Devontae Smith's cleats. But it's not enough to be in position. And Kendall said that. So said as much after the game. It's one thing to be there. It's one thing to make the play when you're there. He's a veteran. I'm going to have faith that he's going to not only be there this time, but also make the play. Now I think Benjamin has to be the guy that steps up the most for the secondary to keep the Eagles passing game grounded, which I think last year this time would have been a very surprising thing to say. Just kind of shows you how well Jalen Hurts has done this year. So bold predictions, Chris, what do you got for us in the bold prediction category?
So here's where I'm going to go. The Eagles are going, and this might not be a bold prediction because they do it all the time, but it's going to be a bold prediction because, hell, I wanted it to be a bold prediction. The Eagles are going to win the takeaway battle. And, David, tie the Johnny Unitas-led 1958. 58. That's a lot of years ago. Baltimore Colts for winning the turnover margin in every one of their first 9 games. No team has done that since 1958. The Baltimore Colts, and for those of you not historian buffs, that team, of course, and they played in the NFL Championship at Yankee Stadium that year, widely considered the greatest game ever played. that team. Again, the Eagles, by winning the turnover margin on Monday night, can tie and become the first team since the Baltimore Colts to do that in each of their first 9 games. They are very highly ranked, top 3 in turnover margin and in takeaways. And we all know that Taylor Heineke is, let's just say, apt to make one of those, yeah, what are you doing type of passes. So I think that's where it's going to come from.
Yeah, big play Slay is definitely looking forward to Monday Night Football. I'm going the opposite direction for my bold prediction, and I'm going to say the Commanders are winning the turnover battle.
Now, that's a bold prediction. Mine was a weak prediction. That's a bold prediction.
Now, I know our listeners might be saying, wait, hold up. One of you is predicting the Eagles will win the turnover battle. One of you is predicting the Commanders will. So basically, when we come back post-game and say one of us was right in our bold prediction, we're kind of cheating. So we'll throw a kicker in there, and it is that Benjamin St-Juste gets his pick 6 back. So Commanders win the turnover battle, and Benjamin St-Juste gets a pick 6. Right now, Chris, my crossover episode prediction was 27-20 Eagles. The Eagles are still favored by 11 points, thanks to our friends over at betonline.ag or .net. I think I'm going to shift that a little bit, but I kind of agree with Gino and Louie over at Locked On Eagles. I am going to go now 27-24. So I still think the Eagles win, but I think it's a closer scoring margin, just because I do think that opening up that slot a little bit more should give Washington a little bit more ability to put more points on the board. But I do still think that the Eagles eke this one out.
Yeah. So I too am going with a close game, but not a close enough, maybe not as close as you, but I do have the Commanders covering the plus 11 or 10.5 if it drops to that. Again, check out Bet Online for the latest odds, but it's right now plus 11 as we record this going into the game. But I have the Eagles winning 23-16. 23-16. You know, usually the Commanders, David, are stuck on 17. This time I think they fall 1 point short, 23-16.
We shall see.
Absolutely. All right. Hopefully you guys will be with us after the game. David will be in Philadelphia, and we will have plenty of coverage. Of course, it's a short week ahead as the Commanders, after a Monday night game, are heading to Houston for Lovie Smith and the Texans after that. Thanks for making the Locked On Commanders podcast your first listen or view today. For your second listen and view, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. Again, David was a guest on the last edition of last week. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today. It's available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. You want to hop in on the voicemail line? It's 301-615-3577. That's 301-615-3577 for David Harrison, covering the Washington Commanders for Commander Country, SI.com's FanNation. I'm Chris Russell, one half of the Russell and Ned Hirsch Show on the Team 980 and always live free on the Odyssey app. If you're out and about, please be safe. Be kind to one another. Commanders fans, if you're heading up to Philadelphia, please be safe and don't do anything stupid. And thank you for joining us right here on the Locked On Commanders podcast.